What was the usual sort of response to drought before you were brave enough to try something different?
We'd probably sell what we felt was saleable, and once we got down to what we really wanted to hold on to, we would just sit tight, feed out lick, feed out hay. I even remember rolling out a little bit of hay at a few different waters. Pulling calves, we've done that a couple of times now, and we did it in this last drought as well. So we went through and pulled them off right down to newborns and hand raised everything. Yeah, you sit tight in drought, there were dead cattle. You just wait it out and then pick up and go again once the rains came. So it's fully destocking is not something we've ever considered before. And Dad found it really hard because it seemed so extreme to him. He's never done that, never gone that far. And whereas my brother and I more looked at it as a proactive, we still made the call way too late. Like we never should have got to that, to the point that we did, to finally being able to make the call. I would give most of that credit to having done the Grazing for Profit school. I suppose having that education and feeling like we had options. We also had good connections on people that we could talk to. But the biggest thing was just having different things that we could put in place. Like if we did sell our breeders that we would have normally held on to, well, putting that money aside from their sale and having it sitting there ready so when we did have feed again, we could bring them back in. Education would be a huge thing. Just realising that there are other options and having the different tools, I suppose, different calculators, learning, really looking at figures, knowing what your costs are and things, and so that you could really do your figures and work out what it was going to cost, how you were going to get back in and how to do it. But putting a few safeguards in place, so it's not just let's sell everything, we don't know how we're going to come back in. I mean, there's still a little bit of that uncertainty, but at least we've got a little bit of a plan.
So the next possible hazard, is it too early to bring the cattle back?
Yeah, in the back of my mind is the saying that a lot of people lose the benefit of destocking by restocking too fast. And ideally, we wouldn't be bringing any cattle back. Like these 11 decks turning up in a few days' time wouldn't be coming back until at least after winter, just so that we know if we're going to have any more feed on the ground. In some ways, we'll lose a little bit of production from the grass that is growing well now, but it's so patchy. Like we're still feeling the effects of the drought. We've only had 200 mil of rain, and that has been effective, but it's still, because of the lack of subsoil moisture and what it's coming out of, it's not as effective as what it would have been, say, following on from an average year. So I still feel like our feed is maybe 50% of what it could be or has been in the past. So I'm conscious that when we bring the cattle back now, I want to try and make sure we don't just take 2 steps back and are back to overgrazing the fragile country, where we have plants trying to come through now but haven't had the time or the water to be able to get properly established. So just managing our grazing pressure is the next biggest hurdle, I think, that we've got to try and cross.
What do you think contributed to your decision to bring stock back now as opposed to
later? Mm-hmm. So probably one of the biggest reasons for the stock coming back from where they are is the agistment is quite costly at the moment, and we do still have obviously running costs here, and so when you're paying outside agistment on top of that, just the cost of agistment was the biggest pressure for these first lot of cattle coming back. And also bringing them back in a smaller number where there's going to be 2 mobs, I feel like I'll be able to at least manage them a little bit more rather than having everything coming back at once.
With cattle prices pretty good at the moment, you might be tempted to sell, but yep. It's your genetics that you want to keep. Is that
partly? It's we had that question when we've got these all replacement heifers down there, and it's a huge thing of like, do we sell them and then buy cattle back in later? We don't have them now, and I don't know if there was necessarily a right or wrong answer with that, but we decided to keep them. One, because I mean the genetics plays a part, but I also don't believe that there aren't better cattle out there. We could easily turn around and buy cattle who are just as good. A big factor is wanting to incorporate in the Marama Guardian dogs, And so I know the handling that these cattle have already had from earlier on, and the handling that I now have the time to give them. So I want these to be the start of the mob that we're incorporating the dogs into. So this opportunity to bring back these 140 heifers, in some, it's probably more a little bit opportunistic in the management side of it. Whether it was a right or wrong call as far as the sales side, I don't know. Because, you know, we could have sold these, they're chance mated. We don't know if they're going to be pregnant for another few months until I can pre-test them and find out, versus buying in PTIC heifers in August. Decided to go, you know, if we get really good winter rain, maybe we can still look at getting those other pregnant heifers anyway. But we wanted to bring these girls home for these other reasons.
So what are your strategies for running the cattle that are coming back onto your country?
So we're still trying to work out which way to go on this, because it seems that every time you have a plan, there's so many complications and problems that come with it. Originally, we were talking about putting all our cattle out into one area so that the rest of the station was being spilled, and then moving them as one big mob. The logistics on that just became quite daunting, because then you're suddenly working with a mob of 1,000 cows. Ideally, I would like to get to the point where we don't have to employ staff, and it's just a couple of us here with a couple of teams of dogs, and we can do everything on our own. Maybe getting a chopper in, getting some air support in to actually gather the cattle when we need to. If we're working with a mob of 300 cows, we can do that. So I would like to ideally, instead of having all the cattle out in one area, have them split up maybe into 2 or 3 mobs in areas that are fenced off, but then manage them within that area. So turning waters on and off, and using lick attractants and different strategies like that to be able to actually control their grazing within that area, but without having to necessarily go and pick up that mob and shift them to the other end of the station when it's time for a paddock shift. So because our cattle are now already actually split into 3 mobs, we've got the cattle from down south, the cattle up north, and the other cattle over at Sheila Lake. We've got our 3 different mobs so that we can bring them back as already an entire mob and maybe keep them in that unit. So that's our plan at the moment. The other issue with going too big a mob at once is our water infrastructure would need to be upgraded to be able to handle big mobs of cattle at one time, and we have a water supply issue on a lot of our bores. So smaller numbers at this point is going to be better. The consequences of that, without actually fencing an area up smaller, is that when it rains, we can't necessarily stop those cattle from spreading back into country that they've already grazed. So there is a price to pay for not having them completely fenced out of country at all times. And then there's also the burden of the feral donkeys and things. So there's already grazing pressure out in a lot of that country. So there's a few things that are all going to play their part. But
do you see that your musters will change?
I hope so.
What would you like to see?
I would love to see it that eventually we can go and gather them up without needing aircraft at all. That would be ideal. And maybe changing the mob behaviour in a way, maybe seeing if there's a way we can incorporate the IMG, instinctual migratory grazing of Bob Kingford's, along those lines, like just start having our cattle grazing in the areas that we want them to graze in, and then being open to be shifted and planted and working in an area so that they aren't so much just go out into country and then just spread out. We want them to stay together, so then they are easier to pick up and shift.
What do you think your country will be when it's in the best condition?
I love that. Someone said, don't look short-sighted. Imagine what you want the place to look like in 100 years' time. I would love to see it with 100% ground cover. Would be massive, because the heat we get up here is unrelenting, and if it's only going to get hotter, that's huge. To have all the biodiversity back, have the different species, not monocultures, and be able to look further than just your few main grasses and things. The wildlife, have back. My goal is to have dung beetles all year round. That would be amazing. So just seeing that biodiversity and that life, I want to see that life come back, and it be there all year round, and it not just come with the rain. Obviously the rain is going to kickstart things and increase things, but if we look after it, I think it can be there all the time. but I haven't seen that yet. So I'm really hoping it's possible. I hope I get to see it. Maybe it'll be the next generation.